Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
This is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with DefeatYourCravings.com. I'm here with John Chancellor from Teach the Soul, who has another quote from his new book, Words to Live and Work By, to impart some practical life wisdom which we can try to apply to food.
So I want to start with a quote from Henry Ford, and he says, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're probably right. And this is an interesting little story about an individual, George Dantzig. If I ask you what your potential is, what would your answer be? And you would probably ask me to clarify what I meant by your potential or your potential in what. Well, I want you to think for a minute about your potential earning capacity, your potential to accumulate wealth, your potential for doing good in the world, for helping others.
I've always felt like I've had an extraordinary potential to help others and do good in the world. I always thought I was going to be famous. I never really thought I had tremendous potential to earn millions of dollars or anything like that. I knew I was going to do something important, but I never felt like I was going to be wealthy.
What I would say is most people fall rather short of their potential, and that's what I want us to think about. While we're thinking about that, I'm going to tell you a story about an incident that happened in the life of George Dantzig. George had gotten an undergraduate degree from the University of Maryland. After that, he got his master's in math from the University of Michigan. And then he had read some very interesting statistic papers published by Professor Neyman at Berkeley and decided that he wanted to pursue his doctoral studies in statistics under Neyman. So he wrote to Berkeley, and eventually he got a teaching assistantship pursuing his doctoral degree in statistics. One day, George was a little late for class and missed the first part of the lecture. But there were two problems on the board, and George assumed they were homework problems, homework assignments, so he copied them down. George found the problems difficult, but he persisted, and after a few days, he had solved the problems. He took the homework to Neyman and apologized for handing it in late, and he actually asked the professor if he still wanted them. Well, Neyman took the homework and just tossed it in a pile of papers on his desk, and George thought that his papers would be lost forever. About 6 weeks later, one Sunday morning around 8 in the morning, there was a knocking at his door, and it was Professor Neyman. And he was extremely excited about the problems. I've just written an introduction to one of your papers. Read it so I can send it out right away for publication. It was only then that George learned the truth about what had happened that day he was late for class. Neyman had told the class that the two problems on the board were currently very famous unsolved statistic problems. George did not know that the problems could not be solved. Had he known that the problems had stumped all the brains in statistics, what do you think he would have done, Glenn?
He would have not applied himself to it at all.
Absolutely. Only because he really didn't know that he couldn't solve them did he devote the time and effort to solving the problems. Now, back to your potential. No matter what area of your life you choose to think about, if you're like most people, you have accepted as fact somebody else's limitations on your potential. The simple truth is we're all capable of much more than we accomplish. We put all of our energy into solving problems and reaching goals, partially due to the fact that most of us believe certain problems cannot be solved. So we don't put enough attention because we don't believe certain problems that we're capable of doing things. Just like you said that you've never thought about accumulating wealth. For you, that's your truth. You don't believe that that's possible. So that becomes a self-limiting belief. Your potential is much greater than you think. But if you allow other people's belief about things to impact what you can and can't do, you'll never achieve your potential. Now, with respect to eating, how many people have run into, Glenn, that says it's not possible to control your eating behavior? You can go on a diet, but it's not going to work. You can do this, it's not going to work. It's foolish. If we buy into that, if we think that it's not possible, it's not for us.
All the time I have people tell me, I can't eat healthy for more than a week, or more than 5 days, or more than 14 days. Or it's not possible for me to get below XYZ weight. Or I can't live without sugar. All sorts of things like that. And I'm accustomed to challenging them with them, but it's funny, I don't really challenge myself about, I have enough money, but I don't really challenge myself about wealth. That's really interesting. I'm going to have to take that to heart. Yeah, the power of limiting thoughts.
I think with so much of our personal behavior, it can't happen. It can't be done. It's unsolvable. We accept what they say. And that's one of my least favorite terms in the world is they say. But we accept the accepted wisdom of the masses that diets are doomed to fail or food plans are doomed to fail. No, they're only doomed to fail because we accept that.
I've said these things before in various podcasts, but it kind of comes to a fulcrum here, or an inflection point. What's the right word? It comes to a head here. Human learning, people fall down and get up until they stay up. That's how human learning is. So you can't until you can. That's just how life is. You can't until you can. Fall down 7 times, get up 8, like the old Japanese proverb, I think it is. Jean-Luc Picard said in one episode, things are only impossible until they're not. It's not really fiction. It's true. I see people do impossible things all the time. Your inner reptile says, your inner food monster says that you couldn't, so you can't. That you couldn't, so you can't. But the truth is that you can't until you can. I learned that from yoga. There's a big sign that said you can't until you can. And there are things I couldn't even come close to doing, not even move in the direction of doing for years, that all of a sudden I could do. Like I couldn't even touch my shins. That's how bad I was. But you can't until you can. There are things that yield to fortitude and persistence and belief that you could be stuck with forever if you don't consider that it might be possible when you think it's not.
So I would invite your listeners to adopt the attitude of George Danzig, and it's possible. I just got to devote the time and effort to it.
Yes.
It's possible. I'm not going to listen to my brother-in-law or my neighbor or anybody else that is telling me it can't. I'm just going to assume that it's possible and do it.
Fair enough. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.